Hi, I'm Coach Corey Wayne, and this is my video coaching newsletter. And the topic of today's newsletter is going to be creating rapport, how to prevent no shows on first dates. Well, this particular email is from a guy. I think he's in his late 20s. He's probably kind of a late bloomer, doesn't have much dating and relationship experience, just judging by what he's doing. So he's trying to meet and date women exclusively from the dating apps. And this is something that I see a problem with a lot of guys who are younger. Is just, the new generation, you guys that grew up with iPhones, it's like those things are like pacifiers to y'all. And something that you're going to struggle with is that even though you're meeting women online is like a lower risk way. In other words, you're not having to really risk a lot of rejection versus approaching women in person, which is quite frankly the way you should be doing it. A lot of you guys have underdeveloped social skills to where you just hide behind your digital device electronically. Because even if you get a woman out on a date, if you don't have any social skills in person, if you can't even carry a regular conversation, then your dates are just not going to go well. And so I see a lot of guys doing things like this. I had a conversation with a client the other night. He was in his mid 20s, same thing. He's getting girls that are flaky, they're canceling, or he gets their number, sets a date, they're canceling the day of, or they're being a no-show. And when I talked to him, he had several interactions with women that he had dates planned for. And so he read me the text exchanges and things that he was saying. And judging by the responses that he's getting back from these women, it's pretty clear he doesn't really have good rapport with them. Some of them he met online, some of them he met in person, but you can tell, it's almost like these guys think, I got her number, boom, I'm home free. And then they want to flee from the conversation. They want to flee from the interaction. Or the guy makes a date online and he wants to flee and then hoping that he shows up and the date is just going to go amazing. And if you're going to lean on the dating apps as your only source of meeting women because you're too afraid to approach them in person and develop your social life and your social skills, you're going to struggle. Now, one thing that I should say that my parents really helped me out a lot when I was in middle school, is I worked in their business. They had a couple coin-operated laundries, and they had drop-off service. So when I was in 7th grade, my dad started taking me to work on Saturdays with him so I could interact with customers, I could practice giving change, and that was something like when I first started, I couldn't even count change. I didn't know how to do that. And so my dad taught me how to do that. It's just the basics of, hi, how are you? Can I help you? Asking people questions. It forced me to get outside my comfort zone because I'd always been a pretty shy child at that point. And so every weekend I was forced to interact with people. They're obviously I'm a kid basically. I'm a kid in middle school, but I was learning the ropes of business. I was learning the ropes of customer service, watching my dad do it because he'd been in customer service his whole life. And so that helped me out a lot. And then when I turned 18 and I got my first job working for somebody else other than my parents, started working at Service Merchandise, which was strictly a customer service representative. So all day long, hey, can I help you? Can I help you find something? Because you'd see people looking around like, where do I go? What do I do? Where's this at? So all day long, people are coming to you and you're giving them advice. Or like even back then, we would be selling shotguns. Like we would do the part, get all the paperwork, and then the manager would come over. This is pre, like nowadays when you buy a gun, you got an app at the gun shop. But back then we sold rifles and we sold shotguns. And so you had to be good at customer service, or it was fishing reels or fishing poles or different things for your bass fishing boat, whatever it happened to be, your life vests. So we got to know the products real well, and we had to be able to answer questions. I'd be answering people's questions about the treadmills that we sold because we would have to put them together. The exercise bikes, same thing. We're always answering questions and helping people fill out their orders. And so just being in the habit of having customer service jobs. And then later, when I got to be 21, I started tending bar. And so, hey, what are you guys up to? What are you girls doing tonight? You're in a position of authority. People are coming up to you. You got your friends coming in to see you. It forces you to interact with other human beings and to interact with a lot of other human beings. And so if you're one of those guys that's watching this and you really haven't had a lot of customer service type of experience with other humans, or your social skills are lacking, I would highly recommend you go get a part-time job waiting tables or tending bars, some kind of customer service job where you're forced to interact with other human beings, because you have to get good at small talk. And this is one of the things I was impressing upon my client the other night, is that when you leave your house, if you're not good with your social skills, you need to get in the habit of asking other people questions. Get in the habit of practicing your small talk wherever you go. Because you can't read 3% Man and then just think you're going to walk outside and women's panties are going to just, fall around their ankles. Or that you're going to create an online dating profile and the girls are just going to start showing up and at a queue outside your door. It doesn't work that way. You have to create some kind of rapport with the women so they feel safe and they feel comfortable meeting you, but you also have to make sure that they're genuinely, sincerely interested in you. And because this guy is clearly, the one that wrote the email, is clearly making dates with women that have low to no interest in him, and he can't even tell. He has no idea. And on top of that, he's trying to make dates and just kind of hide through text and just figure he can get the girl from the app to meet up. Now, you can do that in some cases, but you're going to have some texting. Most girls are going to want to see that you can send 4 or 5 texts back and forth and that you're not some kind of weirdo. And that, if you're going to set a date and you're not going to, especially if you're not even going to talk to her on the phone, your date better be set within like 24 to 48 hours. Because the lower the level of rapport, like back in the day when I used to online date, I always talked to every girl on the phone. Because if you can't have a good conversation on the phone, then there's no point in meeting in person. And a lot of guys who are not good in their social skills try to hide behind their phones and figure that they'll just show up and things will go great in person. Well, if you're not good with creating small talk with, something simple, like you go to put gas in your car and some dude pulls up in a nice pickup truck, it's got cool rims on it, compliment him on his truck, ask him about it, get in the habit of being curious about other people and asking them questions, especially creating small talk with people when you really don't feel like you want to. Because when you do that enough, and you've done that several hundred times, and then you turn around in the line at the grocery store and there's a beautiful girl staring at you, smiling at you, right away you know to start asking her about some of the items that she's put on the little conveyor belt at the cashier. What are you making? Who are you cooking for? Something simple. Oh, what are you going to make with that? So you practice those kinds of things with old ladies or whoever's behind you, or are you talking to somebody in the elevator where you live or in the office. You got to get in the habit of saying hello to people and practicing rapport building skills, because you never know when you're going to turn around, there's going to be a cute girl standing there. And if you haven't practiced small talk and you haven't rehearsed it, you're going to choke. It's not going to go well. And even if you are successful getting the number, the woman can tell you're all in your head. You're going to be coming off as kind of weird. You're going to give off a weird vibe, and she's not going to feel safe. When you have a good interaction, like when you go through the book, 3% Man, and especially if you watch the videos that we did with Katie, my English girlfriend, from the book, it's like, even though it was like 17 years after we were last together, people could tell watching the videos, like, man, the chemistry that you guys have is still there. It's off the charts. It was like that from the moment we met. But by the time I met her in person, we were eye-fucking each other the day before at the event. She ended up leaving early, so I didn't get a chance to ask her out. But we were there for 10 days, so I knew I was going to see her again. And so the very next night, I'm walking out with a female friend of mine after we just had dinner, one of my platinum partners. And then there was Katie standing there with those beautiful big brown eyes smiling at me, eye fucking me again. And I just walked right over there and started talking to her. And it's like, hey, you were at the event last night. You were sitting about 2 rows up in front of me. And she says, yeah, you were behind me. And she even mentioned what kind of a shirt I was wearing. I mean, so when you're getting eye fucked and you go up and you start talking to somebody and they remember you from the day before, that means they really like you. There's a high level of interest. And so we only talked for maybe 2 or 3 minutes, and I made a date on the spot to meet at the same restaurant because I was staying at that hotel and she was staying at the one next door. So we agreed to meet there the next night at the end of the event. And I got there first and I saw her walk in. I waved to her. She excitedly smiled and came over and sat down. And the rest was history. And so we had real good rapport. We spent the whole week together. And then when I came back to the States, I told her that I was traveling for the next couple of weeks. But when I got back, that I'll send her an email and then let her know what dates I'm available. And then she can book her flight. And then I'll just pick her up at the airport. And so 2 weeks later, after traveling, I come back, I send her an email. Great, had a great time, really looking forward to see you. Here's the dates. Send me your itinerary and I'll pick you up at the airport. And about 12 hours later, she sent me her itinerary through the email. She had purchased her ticket. And I said, great, I can't wait to see you. We're going to have a blast. And I had spent the whole week with her before at Tony Robbins' Date with Destiny. So we had a lot of rapport together. She had stayed with me in my hotel. So she wasn't some stranger I met online. By the end of the week, we were walking around holding hands. Even like the next day, people were like, how long have you guys been together? Thinking that we're going to say, 5 years. We're like, we just met. We had our first date yesterday. And people were shocked. But when you understand the stuff that's in the book, the rapport building happens naturally and everybody can see the rapport between the two of you. And so it takes time. It takes a lot of work to get to that point. And so I didn't converse with Katie. We didn't talk. We didn't Skype or nothing. I had her information. I had her itinerary. And I just showed up at the airport and then watched her come down out of the customs area. She jumped in my arms and we hugged and we had a blast together. And the rest is kind of part of our history together. And for those of you that watch the videos, those are also in the paying members only area of the website. You can see the podcast that we did with her and the girls and Chunky. And again, the chemistry is off the charts. And that is what you want. You want somebody to have a high level of rapport with, a high level of chemistry with. And so if you're going to exclusively lean on online dating, you're going to have to practice your small talk, because then if you do get a girl out on a date and you choke and you're all up in your head and you're trying to fumble over your words and try to carry a conversation, you're going to come off as weird and awkward, and the woman's not going to feel safe, and she's going to be looking around, oh, wow, look at the time, I got to go, or hey, I'm supposed to meet my friends later, it's been great meeting you, have a nice night, and she's going to be looking to dip. And so it would behoove you to at least spend 10 to 15 minutes on the phone with these girls. Number one, because you want to create rapport with them. And number two, you want to make sure that the conversation goes well. Because if you can't have a good conversation on the phone, the kind of conversation where you hang up, it kind of feels like somebody you've always known, like you really jive, you get along really well from the moment you start talking, you're not going to have that kind of rapport with every single girl that you match with online. And if you don't really feel like you click in the phone call, you could say, hey, it was great chatting with you. We should, maybe next week we'll chat again. And then you just never call her. Or you could, but the point being is that you should only be making dates with girls that you like talking to and who seem to have a high level of enthusiasm for talking to you. It's, you can tell from this guy's email that he's just hoping to get a girl in front of him and that it's just going to go great. But the fact that he's in his late 20s and he's not really doing, because what I found, and take Katie, for example. I mean, I met her in an event. I had a few friends there that I knew, but for the most part, I didn't really know anybody there. And so I was on the other side of the country. I was in California at that particular time for the Date with Destiny event. And it's like, but that's after years of creating rapport, having been married, having had lots of girlfriends, countless nights out when I was a teenager, when I was in my early 20s with my friends on Friday night, on Saturday night. Just every night we went out, all my friends are very outgoing and we would go out, and it's just every weekend I was constantly meeting new people, joking around, laughing, having a good time, practicing my social skills. And so if you're one of those guys that just hasn't done that, you're going to be kind of behind the eight ball a little bit, and you're going to need to practice that stuff. Like I said, maybe getting some kind of customer service job, waiting tables, tending bars, something like that on the weekends or weeknights, someplace where you can get a lot of practice interacting with other human beings, because you have to do it enough to be able to recognize the difference when somebody really likes talking to you. Also, when someone's just being nice and they don't really want to talk to you, you got to be able to tell, because it's clear this guy does not have enough self-awareness to recognize that he's making dates with women that really don't have any intention on following through, and he has no idea what to look for. And so you have to interact. You have to do what scares you the most, which is interact with other human beings. Because if the conversation doesn't flow and go real well in person, if it doesn't feel like after talking to them for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, like you've known them already and you just click, I mean, you got to think about it. How often do you meet a new best friend? It's something that doesn't happen very often. If you think about the level of rapport that you have with somebody that's close to you, that is a good friend or a family member, things just kind of flow easily and effortlessly. If there's ever a moment where neither one of you is speaking, maybe you're driving in the car together, it feels normal. It feels natural. It's okay. You don't feel like you've got to talk because you can't stand the silence. And so if this particular guy that wrote this email definitely needs to get out more and get out of his house and start interacting with other human beings, and fill his weekends and his weeknights when he's not working, fill it full of fun activities, social activities, doing things that he loves, that he enjoys with other like-minded people, because that's where you're going to have your best conversations. Because the odds of me meeting a woman like Katie on the street versus a Date with Destiny type of seminar, when we're both into self-help, we're both into healthy eating, taking care of our bodies, and studying. We had so many things in common. She had been into Tony Robbins for many years. I'd been into Tony Robbins for many years. But outside of an event like that, what are the odds that I'm going to run into some random girl on the street that has those same interests? It does happen. I've met a few girls in the building that I live in now that were actually platinum partners at different times. But one of them got in the elevator and she had a Tony Robbins event shirt on. And so I started asking her about it, come to find out she was a platinum partner. I was like, oh, when were you a platinum partner? Right away, it was easy to talk to her because we had a lot in common already. And that's what you want to have. You want to have good rapport. You want to have a good conversation. The kind of conversation where when it ends, you're kind of sad that it ended and you look forward to getting together again. Not the kind of conversation where it ends and you feel relieved that it's over. And then, oh, whew, okay, next week, hopefully it'll go better when I see her and I'm dressed nicer and she'll really like my clothes or my outfits. Like, you got to get to the point where you can have small talk with people and it goes well, especially in this case if you're only going to try to meet girls through online dating. So, with that in mind, let's go through his email. He says, hi, Corey. I've listened to your audiobook over 7 times and I've watched many of your videos. I'm not great at retaining info, though. So I regularly have to go back and listen to it again. Well, that's why I say you got to read it at least 10 to 15 times. And that's backwards and forwards. That's the whole book. That's not reading it once, highlighting it, and then only rereading the stuff you highlight. Each time you go through it from back to front, especially if you listen to the audiobook on 2-speed and follow along in a digital or physical copy, you can get through it in about 4 hours. You have to spend the time with the material so you get to know it backwards and forwards. And if, like this guy says, he's not real good at retaining information, Because we're only going to retain maybe 7, maybe 8%, 6%, 9%, depending on the person, each time we go through something. And so if he's not good, maybe he should probably be reading it for 20 or more times, start to finish. And I'm talking about where he's really concentrating on it, not where he's driving in the car, doing other things, or he's doing something in his house and listening to it through a Sonos system while he's intermittently cleaning and vacuuming and stuff like that. I'm talking about where you really spend the time trying to absorb the information and you're focused on it. Because you have to get to know it so well, you don't have to think about it anymore. And if you just kind of half-ass it and cherry pick like a lot of guys do, you're going to struggle and you're going to miss things and you're going to make mistakes and you're going to unnecessarily talk girls out of liking you who are predisposed to like you. I'm in my late 20s and average looking, and my first dates are consistently no-showing and ghosting. The only reason that's happening is you don't have rapport and you're making dates with girls that really aren't that into you. Just because you got the phone number doesn't mean she really wants to go out with you. Just because you made a date and got off the phone doesn't mean she actually plans on showing up for that particular date. But if you're not good or you're not experienced and you can't tell the difference between you have a high level of rapport with a girl and when she's just being nice to get rid of you, you're going to have this kind of an experience. That's why if you have really good rapport with a girl, you can tell when you want to end the conversation or move on, she wants to keep going. He says they are all from dating apps. This is just the most recent examples. It's happened many other times. I had a definite date scheduled for Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Wednesday. Of those, only one woman showed up, which went well, and she asked for a second date, and we kissed at her car, and she pulled me back in several times. So that's the difference. This is why you got to go out with enough different women so you see these mistakes. You don't make 1 or 2 online dates and they don't show up and go, oh, well, this ain't working. It sucks. But he made 4 dates, 1 showed up. So what did he talk to her on the phone? Did he not? We don't know. But the bottom line is, why did she show up? Because she liked him. And the other ones didn't show up because they didn't like him. And he couldn't tell. So he was making dates with girls that weren't really that interested. That's why if you're going to do online dating, like I've said in the, there was an article I did many, many years ago, the ultimate online dating profile. It's like you should talk to somebody for at least 10 or 15 minutes, because if the conversation doesn't flow on the phone, if you're not excited to talk to her, if it's not easy and effortless to talk to her, then there's no reason to meet in person. Save your time, save your money. Just because you talk to a girl on the phone, you're not obligated to take her out and spend money on her. You're trying to make sure you have quality dates, not just make a bunch of dates and mostly have no-shows and feel like a schmuck. You want to have a good experience. So you got 1 out of 4. So that was a 25% conversion rate. He says, however, with the other women, I can't figure it out. On Sunday, I had the date set days prior and then no communication. The date was a few hours away and I hadn't heard anything from her. I know you say don't call or text to confirm. Well, that's when you have rapport with somebody. Again, I mentioned the example with Katie for a reason. I had a lot of rapport with her. And we were in an event and I could tell by the way she looked at me, she was super into me. And so when I asked her out, it's like, even later, years later when we talked about it, it's even in the book, she's like, I just couldn't say no. It's like you look right through me. But I had a lot of experience by that point. I mean, when we met, I was 34 years old. I wasn't some dude that was hoping to lose his virginity or hoping to get to first base at that point. So I had a lot of experience under my belt. And so I could tell when she was really into me and when she was not. So it's just like meeting girls in general. I can tell who's really interested and I can tell who's not interested in just being nice. And this guy is just not there yet because, again, his path, his journey is his journey. It's going to be different than mine. He says, the last time I followed that advice, I ended up on a date with a no-show. Again, you probably didn't talk to her on the phone and you didn't have a high level of rapport, and you got to understand that women have all the leverage on these dating apps. It's you got most what you see, because the other thing that's interesting is that most women, I think it's like 80% of them, if I remember right, they have their height filter set to 6 feet and above. And so if you're not 6 feet, you're still going to see their profile. Even though they claim otherwise, you're like, wow, there's a lot of girls on here, but most of them are never even going to see your profile. They don't even know about you. But you feel like you're doing a lot because you're answering emails, you're answering messages, you're swiping, so you feel like you're doing something. So you feel like you're making progress even though you're just wasting a lot of your time. He says, so I was not feeling confident about doing that and asked if the date still worked. Again, it's if you would have met this girl at, say, a friend's barbecue on the weekend, and say she was a coworker of your best friend's wife or girlfriend who knows you really well, and you spent 3 or 4 hours hanging out, watching the game, having a few drinks, shooting the shit, talking about where you grew up, talking about where she grew up, and you got her phone number, you're going to call her and you're going to ask her out, and then you're going to go pick her up because you have a high level of rapport. But if you're just trying to make dates with a chick you haven't even talked to on the phone, it's most of the time they're not going to show up unless they really like you. And women will make dates with you and then feel no remorse about not showing up. And so you have to spend the time on the phone talking to these girls, at least 10 to 15 minutes to see if you click. Because again, if you can't have a good, easygoing conversation that you enjoy and that she enjoys in the phone, there's no reason to meet. He says she never responded. So this girl made a date, and then he calls or texts to confirm the date, and she completely ghosted him. So he made a date with a girl that had zero interest in him, and he had no idea until he sent her a message, I guess confirming the date. He doesn't put in here what he said, but the bottom line is she completely ignored him. He says, so I didn't waste my time showing up to that one. On Monday, I had another definite date set. I gave her the time, the place, and said to dress casual. The last thing that was said was Monday morning, she told me about her night, and I said, that sounds like a lot of fun. An hour before the date, I still hadn't heard from her. So I checked her profile, and she had blocked me and my number. She wasn't interested in meeting you, and you couldn't tell. That's why you got to talk to women on the phone. Because doing this and just thinking you're going to text a bunch of girls and line up, 14 different dates for the next 2 weeks, it's not going to work like that, man. It's like if you talk to all 14 of those girls, even if you got the phone number, you might get half of them on the phone. And then you might only end up setting 1 date, maybe 2 dates out of those because the conversations went well. And the rest of them, they were boring to talk to. So why would you want to waste your time driving there? It just tells me he's just trying to put as little time and as little effort and take as little risk as possible and hide behind his phone. This is why it's so much better to meet women in person and develop your social skills in person. Because again, if you can't meet women in person and converse with them and get a number and make a date, then trying to meet women online and leaving out the pickup process and think things are going to go much better, the ones that do show up, a lot of times you'll end up sitting there talking to a girl and you're like, man, this girl's boring. It's like, why the hell did I even make a date with her? So he says, it's very confusing to me. I'm still working on the only texting or calling to set dates. Again, if you're meeting girls online, it's just one way to meet women. And when you look at AI and how far that's advancing, and the fact that it's really easy. When I look through Instagram these days, I'll see these beautiful women on there, and I'll look and I go, I can't even tell if it's AI or it's a legit girl. Or same thing with the pictures. Because there's so many people making fake pictures and fake profiles that look legit. It's going to get to the point where what you're going to end up seeing is a lot of catfishing going on with online dating. And so for the guys that just hide behind their digital devices because they never developed their social skills, they're really going to struggle. They're going to be talking to a girl and come to find out it's going to be some AI that they're talking to. And then they're going to waste a lot of time and who knows what else, or you may end up with a jackass like Andrew Tate on the other end of the line when you think you're talking to a girl. Guys like that, they won't lose a minute of sleep over screwing you over if it helps them get what they want. So you have to deal with those kinds of people out there. So it would behoove you, because like the last time I was on online dating was probably 5-6 years ago. And I just remember apps like Hinge or whatever, there were so many young, attractive girls on there. They were hookers, basically. And so what would happen is you would exchange phone numbers, and then you would notice that the match would go away. And then as you continue to talk, hey, what are you looking for? And then they come right out and tell you what they're really all about. They basically want you to pay them to go out on dates. And I'm like, I'm on a dating app here, and yet here I am meeting. There's hookers on here that are pretending that they're on there for dating. And that's why they block the profile after phone numbers are exchanged, is because a percentage of those guys get pissed off when they find out that they're talking to a hooker and report the profile. And so they don't want their profile to get banned. So that's why they will unmatch with you. So that may have happened here with the other girl that ignored him. Maybe it was a hooker. Maybe she wasn't. She could tell he was not the type of guy that was going to pay her to go out with him. But, there's a lot of time wasters out there. And so, again, if you meet people through your social network and your social life, you're just going to have a much better experience. And your goals and values are much more likely to line up in something like that. You got to think of it in terms of, like, where are you fishing? A really hot, beautiful girl that comes from a good family, that's got an active social life. She's got lots of friends, lots of girlfriends. She's not on a dating app. Every time she goes out or goes to a friend's party on the weekends, she's always meeting new guys, new people through her social group. She doesn't need to be on a dating app. And that's why it's best to get out there and participate in society and fill your life up full of the kind of activities and things you love doing for fun, instead of trying to lean on online dating, because you're going to get a high incidence of girls that are just messed up. They're on the dating app for a reason. Maybe they don't have an active social life. Or maybe they're a bit of a Fruit Loop. So he says, I'm still working on the only texting or calling to set dates. I don't respond fast, and I try to say stuff like I can't wait to hear about it all on our date. Then they typically continue asking questions or wanting to talk. Again, this is why you should spend 10 or 15 minutes on the phone. And I know that is referenced in the book. It tells you to go look at the ultimate online dating profile. It's detailed in there. You should spend 10 to 15 minutes talking on the phone if you're going to do online dating. I would not recommend just strictly trying to text a girl a few times and then get her out on a date, because you're going to have an experience like what this guy is having. He says, I'm not sure how to handle the situation. Wednesday, I also had a definite date set. Again, I told her when, where, and to dress casual. She agreed to it and said, sounds good. And then she says, are you up for any small talk between now and then? With a laughing emoji. And he says, context, I don't waste time chatting. Like, again, that's not what I teach. Again, this tells me this is a guy who is hid behind his electronic device, and you can't use your phone as a substitute for your personality. It's not going to work. And so if she says, hey, are you up for any small talk? He's like, yeah, when are you free? And I would spend 10, 15 minutes talking to her and try to get her out on a date as quickly as possible. If it goes well, the conversation goes well, she's going to feel safe, she's going to feel comfortable. But if she suggests talking on the phone first, and then you laugh it off or brush it off, and then you're shocked that she stands you up, then you shouldn't be surprised. He says, when I get my match, I say, hey, let's skip the small talk. Let me know if you're interested in going on a date and your availability. Yeah, I wouldn't be doing that. Because again, who's going to say something like that? The only guy that's going to say something like that is a guy that's trying to avoid an interaction. Right away, her spidey senses are going on, why wouldn't you want to talk on the phone? What's up with that? Because again, if it doesn't flow well on the phone, it's not going to go well in person. And so some of these girls are wanting to talk to him, and he's avoiding it. He says, I definitely messed this one up. I had some drinks when I was out at dinner. Then I responded after, it's a date. I suppose some is acceptable. What are some of your good qualities? He says, I know this was very stupid and she was probably testing and I failed. I'm wondering, are all the ghosting and no-shows normal? They're normal if you have no rapport. And again, this girl is asking to talk to you first to see if you're not a weirdo or a freak, and you're basically avoiding it, which confirms that you're probably a weirdo and a freak. He says, maybe I'm missing something I'm consistently doing wrong. Again, you're not taking the time. Because if you're selective, if you have plenty of choices and plenty of options, and you're going to go spend your hard-earned money on a girl, you want to talk to her for at least 10 or 15 minutes and make sure that you can at least have a good conversation with her and that you like talking to her and she seems to like talking to you. Because if you don't, you're wasting your time. I get no responses from matches and ghosting after a first date. I've gotten much better at seeing my mistakes, and those usually make sense. However, the agreeing to a definite first date and saying they are really excited only to not show up is confusing. Well, you got to look at what a woman does, not what she says. And the big takeaway is you got to practice your small talk. You got to work on creating rapport. And from now on, when you're trying to make dates with girls online, you should only be making dates with girls you have good phone conversations with. If the conversation is weird and awkward and there's weird pauses and it doesn't seem like she's really that excited, you could just say, hey, I'm sure you're a nice girl, but I'm not really feeling the chemistry. So, I think I'm going to pass, and I wish you all the best on your search. And you might get some girls backing up when you do that. They might be like, oh. And they might, oh, I'm sorry. I'm just a little nervous. And then some of them would just go, okay, yeah, no problem. Click. Don't waste your time. Your time is the greatest gift you can give anybody. So you should only be making dates with women you really want to meet and you're excited to talk to. You enjoyed talking to them when you first spoke and you can't wait to see them again. Because if you have good rapport, you're not going to get stood up. You're not going to get jerked around. You're just being lazy and you're shortcutting things and you're trying to hide behind your phone. And so even when you meet women in person, you got to have good conversations. Like I did a members only video the other day for a guy. He met this girl on the way to a club, talked to her for like a minute or two, got the number, and then made a date like 7 days in advance through text. He did call her. She agreed to it. Then he realized he couldn't make it. He called her back and changed the date to another 7 days in the future. She agreed to it, but then he didn't speak to her for the whole week. And then he texted her saying, hey, I'm going to be about 20 minutes late. And she's like, oh, I hadn't heard from you, so I didn't think we were on. And the reality is she really wasn't that into him. Because think about it. He's on his way to a nightclub, sees a girl. She's probably been drinking. The next day or a couple days later, she probably barely even vaguely remembers talking to the guy. And even then, if he only talked to her for a minute or two, long enough to get the phone number, he should have called her and talked to her for 10 or 15 minutes at least to make sure the conversation went well. The reason she blew him off is because she had low to no interest. And so you can't do things like that. You can't think, oh, well, I got her information online, so this is easy. I don't have to interact with her. I can just show up on a date and things will go great. I mean, you can see when you behave this way, it gives off a weird vibe. Girls are going to think there's something weird or off about you. So if you guys haven't already signed up for our paying members only content, if in the video description of this particular video, there is a link to join on YouTube, there is a link to join on Spotify, and there is a link to join on our website, understandingrelationships.com. Just click the plans tab at the top of your screen on any page when you arrive. And on the website, you can do a 7-day free trial so you can check out and see what content you get as a paying member. And you can choose a monthly plan or an annual plan. If you choose an annual plan at the end of the 7-day free trial, you get a 25% discount. And so what you get is 6 additional paid video coaching newsletters that are accessible only to paying members on a weekly basis. We have a weekly 3% Man Study Group podcast, a weekly Mastering Yourself Study Group podcast. We have the full viewer questions podcast. Any other special videos or reaction videos that we do from time to time as well will be in the members only area for you guys, or I should say the paying members or the premium members on the website as it's called. And if you got a question or a challenge and you want to get my help, go to understandingrelationships.com, click the products tab at the top of your screen on any page of my website, and book a coaching session with yours truly. Until next time, I will talk to you soon.